they weren't a culture fit. I hear this more than almost any other phrase in executive hiring, and almost every time I hear it, I ask a simple follow-up question. What specifically about your culture didn't fit? You know what happens? Silence. Or vague answers about energy or vibe, or something about how the person just didn't feel right. And most of the time, when someone says culture fit, they're not talking about culture at all. They're talking about something else entirely. And that something else costs companies extraordinary talent. What if culture fit has become the most socially acceptable way to avoid having difficult conversations about what actually matters? Because I've watched this pattern repeat for more than 20 years. A company interviews an exceptional candidate, strong track record, relevant experience, clear capability, but something feels off. And instead of naming what something is, everyone agrees, not a culture fit. The candidate gets rejected, and the company never learns what the real concern was. Let me tell you about a founder I worked with. Series B company, growing fast, strong team culture. Everyone prided themselves on being collaborative, transparent, and low ego. They were hiring a VP of product, critical role. They found someone exceptional, built products at 2 well-known companies, shipped features that millions of people used, strong references, clear strategic thinker. The interviews went well. Technically strong, good questions, solid presence. But in the debrief, something interesting happened. The CEO said, "I'm not sure they're a culture fit." I asked, "What specifically concerns you?" Long pause. Then, they're very direct, like maybe too direct. "Our team is really collaborative. We build consensus." This person seemed like they'd just be making decisions and expect everyone to follow. I asked, "Is that a culture problem, or is that actually what you need right now?" Another pause. "What do you mean?" I said, "Your product roadmap has been stuck in consensus mode for the past 6 months. You have 3 competing priorities and no one wants to make the call. Your team is collaborative, that's valuable. But maybe what you need right now isn't more collaboration. Maybe you need decisiveness. And you're calling that a culture problem, when it might actually be the exact capability you're missing." Silence. Then, "Okay, that's uncomfortable, but you might be right." Here's what was actually happening. The company had built a culture where collaboration was valued above decisiveness. That worked when the team was small and decisions were simpler. But as the company scaled, that same culture was becoming a bottleneck. Decisions took too long. Consensus became an excuse for indecision. And when someone showed up who could break that pattern, the immune system kicked in. Not a culture fit. But it wasn't culture. It was discomfort with change. From first principles, let's talk about what culture actually is. Culture isn't what you say you value. Culture is what you actually reward. It's the behaviors that get promoted, the decisions that get praised, the mistakes that get punished. And here's the important part. Cultures need to evolve as companies scale. What works at 20 people might not work at 50. What works at 50 might not work at 200. If your culture never changes, you're not protecting culture, you're protecting stagnation. And culture fit becomes the mechanism through which you reject the very people who could help you evolve. I'd ask you to consider this. How many times have you seen a company reject a candidate for culture fit? And 6 months later, the company is struggling with exactly the problem that candidate would have solved. I've seen it a dozen times. A company rejects a candidate who's too aggressive and then wonders why they can't close enterprise deals. A company rejects a candidate who's too process-oriented and then drowns in operational chaos. A company rejects a candidate who's too technical and then can't scale their infrastructure. The thing they called a culture problem was actually the capability they needed. Let me give you another example. I worked with the founder hiring a VP of sales. Early revenue, strong product. Needed to build an outbound motion. They interviewed someone with a track record of building sales teams from scratch. Aggressive targets, higher accountability, clear scorecards. The founder said, "I don't think they're a culture fit. We're not about aggressive targets. We trust people to do their best work." I asked, "Has that philosophy scaled your revenue?" Uncomfortable silence. Then, "No, that's why we're hiring a VP of sales." I said, "So you need someone who can build accountability, but you're rejecting them for building accountability and calling it a culture issue." Pause. When you put it that way, here's what I've noticed. Culture fit is almost never about whether someone shares your values. It's about whether someone makes you feel comfortable. And those are very different things. Someone can deeply share your values, integrity, excellence, customer focus, and still make you uncomfortable because they operate differently than you do. They might be more direct than you're used to, more structured than you prefer, more intense than feels familiar. And that discomfort gets labeled culture fit. But discomfort isn't a culture problem. Discomfort is often growth. Let me break this down further. I've identified 5 things that commonly get mislabeled as culture fit issues when they're actually something else. First, communication style. Someone communicates differently than your team. Maybe they're more direct, formal, or data-driven. And instead of asking, "Does this communication style serve the outcomes we need?" you ask, "Does this feel like us?" Those are different questions. Second, decision-making speed. Someone makes decisions faster or slower than your current pace. Maybe they want more data. Maybe they're comfortable acting with less. And instead of asking, "Is this the right speed for the problems we're facing?" you ask, "Does this match how we've always done things?" Third, conflict tolerance. Someone is more willing to surface disagreement or tension. Maybe they push back harder. Maybe they ask uncomfortable questions. And instead of asking, "Do we need more honesty about what's not working?" you ask, "Will this person cause problems?" Fourth, risk appetite. Someone has a different relationship with risk. Maybe they're more conservative or more aggressive. And instead of asking, "What's the right risk profile for this stage of the company?" you ask, "Do they think like we think?" Fifth, work style. Someone works differently than your team. Maybe they're more structured, more fluid, or prefer async communication. And instead of asking, "Can we accommodate different styles to access different capabilities?" you ask, "Will they fit into how we work?" See the problem? In every case, culture fit becomes shorthand for this person is different, and different feels uncomfortable. So let's reject them using a phrase that sounds legitimate. But difference isn't a bug. At growth stage, difference is often exactly what you need. Because the capabilities that got you here might not be the capabilities that get you there. Now let me be clear. I'm not saying culture doesn't matter. Culture matters enormously. But real culture is about values, not preferences. It's about integrity, excellence, customer focus, ownership. These are cultural values. And those transcend communication styles, decision-making speeds, and work preferences. If someone shares values but operates differently, that's not a cultural problem. That's diversity of thought. And diversity of thought is what allows companies to scale. Here's a simple reframe you can use immediately. Before rejecting someone for culture fit, ask yourself, what specifically am I concerned with? And then, is that concern about values or is it about comfort? If it's about values, integrity, ethics, customer focus, then yes, that's culture. And it matters. But if it's about comfort, style, speed, preferences, then that's not culture. That's just difference. And rejecting difference limits your company's ability to evolve. Let me tell you what happened with that VP of product candidate I mentioned earlier. The CEO decided to move forward, not because the concern went away, but because they reframed it. Instead of, this person isn't collaborative enough, they said, this person is decisive in ways we haven't been. And that might be exactly what we need. The VP joined. First 3 months were uncomfortable. They made decisions faster than the team was used to. They pushed back on consensus seeking. They forced clarity where ambiguity had been tolerated. The team didn't love it at first, but something interesting happened. Velocity increased. The product roadmap started moving. Features started shipping. And after 6 months, the team couldn't imagine going back to the way things were before. The culture fit concern turned out to be the exact thing the company needed. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Culture fit is real. Values matter. But most of the time, when someone gets rejected for culture fit, it's not actually about culture at all. It's about discomfort with difference. And that discomfort, when left unnamed, becomes the mechanism through which companies reject the very capabilities they need to scale. So the next time you're in a debrief and someone says, I'm not sure they're a culture fit, don't let that be the end of the conversation. Push deeper. Ask, what specifically concerns you? Is that a values issue or a style issue? If it's a style issue, does that style give us something we're missing? Are we rejecting this person because they don't share our values or because they don't make us comfortable? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they're necessary. Because growth stage companies don't die from hiring people who are different. They die from having people who are all the same. And culture fit, when used carelessly, becomes the excuse that keeps companies small.